Ask Governor Murphy, a co-production of WBGO, WNYC, and WHYY. I'm Nancy Solomon. We're just weeks away from a crucial election, and few people seem to be paying attention. The entire legislature is on the ballot, and there's more open seats than we've seen in a long time. We'll talk with the governor about it. Do you have a question for him? What kind of politicking are you seeing in your community? Give us a call at 844-745-8255. That's 844-745-TALK. We'll also be taking questions via social media using the hashtag AskGovMurphy. The number again, 844-745-TALK. We're joined now by Governor Phil Murphy. Good evening.
Nancy, it's good to be with you, and I want to thank up front the many thousands of Devils fans who have agreed not to watch the first period tonight and instead listen to our program.
We're competing against something pretty big time in New Jersey.
Pretty big time. The game's in Charlotte, North Carolina, but the Devils are there, and they had an incredible series against the Rangers, and I feel like they're on a roll right now, and go Devils.
And you're taping it so you can go back and watch it?
I'm not taping it, but I've got sons who are of particular interest watching it somewhere. Okay,
so let's start with something that happened Monday. The Muslim mayor of Prospect Park, which is just north of Patterson, was on his way to an Eid celebration, as you know, at the White House, and he was called and told the Secret Service wouldn't let him in, and no reason was given. Mohammed Karula is a Syrian-born naturalized citizen, and he's been an elected official in his town since 2001. He's very well respected statewide. And yesterday, you said he's a good friend of yours. Have you been able to find out why he was barred from entering the White House?
No, I'm not. And given it's a security matter, I'll bet you we won't. We called the White House immediately when we heard this news to express our extreme disappointment and surprise. I called Mohammed right after that. The irony, Nancy, is we had our Eid celebration at the governor's mansion on Saturday, and Mohammed was there. I acknowledged him. He is a dear friend. He's a 5-time, I think, elected mayor. We bonded over politics, but I think much more importantly over the years, based on his Syrian roots in this awful civil war that the brutal dictator there, aided and abetted by Vladimir Putin, has thrust upon the Syrian people. So very surprised, very disappointed. Great guy. It won't change for 1 second, our relationship. And by the way, we had just mentioned, on Saturday, I also just signed a resolution that is making January Muslim Community Appreciation Month, which I'm incredibly proud of. And that's part of the reason he was there.
Well, that leads right to the next follow-up. I want to ask you about this. The Council on Islamic American Relations says the problem is the terrorist watch list that the federal government maintains that has 1.5 million people on it. And that organization and the mayor call this list unconstitutional and discriminatory. And it just strikes me that this could put you between a rock and a hard place, that your relationship with this large overlapping Arabic and Muslim communities in New Jersey and your loyalty to the Democratic president. Yeah. Like, I mean, do you feel like you can't really speak out on this issue?
No. In fact, I have. I had some sort of a press availability. Alex Altman's with me a couple of days ago, yesterday. And I was asked a bunch of questions. I've been quite clear that I'm extremely disappointed that this guy's a dear friend. Now, listen, people should know, it wasn't like, and this is no excuses, period, okay? And we know this guy well. There were 400 Muslims in the White House, I'm told, for the Eid event. So I know on the one hand, the Biden administration takes that community very seriously. That doesn't make this any less unfortunate. And it won't change for 1 second how we treat Mohammed as a friend, as a leader, or the community more broadly. We have, I think, the second largest and the largest Muslim by percent Muslim community of any American state. Michigan is really the only one that comes close. And so this is a community central to our state. He's an important guy in that community, in addition to being a close friend.
He says that this isn't about him and getting him and his name off the list. Of course, he wants that,
Yep.
but that it's really a civil rights issue that needs to be dealt with for everybody else on that list.
Yeah. And by the way, you don't even know who's on the list, and you don't know yourself if you're on the list.
Right.
And I know that because Muhammad and I spoke about it at the time, probably 4 years ago, his name got transposed. Do you remember this? With someone else who was a legitimate by either the same name or a similar name, who was someone legitimately around which there was some concern, but it blew up Muhammad's life for, I forget what, a plane ride he couldn't take or something like that. Enough already. This is a good guy.
Okay, listeners, we're taking your calls, 844-745-8255. That's 844-745-TALK. Or you can tweet at us using the hashtag AskGovMurphy. So the entire state legislature is up for re-election this year. The deadline to register for the June primary is May 16th, so 2 weeks away. Early voting in the primary begins June 2nd, and the primary election day is June 6th. I know you know all this.
Yeah.
These are off-year legislative primaries, are among the lowest turnout elections that we have. But they're super important in terms of the impact that it has on the lives of everyday New Jerseyans. And because redistricting and gerrymandering has given us voting districts that are dominated by one party or the other, the primary in most places is more important than the general election.
Arguably, yes.
So yet these legislative off-year elections are among our lowest turnout, as I said. So, but what do you think? Do you agree with me in terms of the importance and the fact that the primary is even more important than November election?
Not in every district, but certainly in a bunch, as you rightfully point out. I mean, we're like America. We've got blue districts, red districts, and purpley districts. So the purpley ones matter a lot in November. But the red and the blue you're absolutely right. The June election is arguably more important. And you're unfortunately also right. Not that I begrudge your being right, but but the turnout in these elections are typically quite low, and there's a lot at stake. We're negotiating the budget. The legislature is incredibly important.
Yeah.
Folks probably know this, but if they don't, this only happens every once in a while, where you've got the Senate up again after only 2 years because of the redistricting process. So you've got the whole legislature on the ballot in 2023 as they were in 2021, which is unusual, but it matters.
And no one at the top of the ticket.
And no one at the top. So you've got, I'm not on the ballot. Neither U.S. senator is on the ballot. And it's an odd year. The Congress are not in the ballot because they're all even year elections. So yeah, I would just say, I'd plead with folks listening, if you're on the fence or if you haven't registered, get out there, exercise your right.
There are a surprising number of districts that have no incumbent running in the state Senate. There are only 40 seats in the Senate, and there are 8 districts with no incumbent running. That would be a 5th, according to my bad math skills.
You were precise.
And there's one district that has 2 incumbents running because of redistricting. Right. In the assembly, there are 20 open seats. That's more than double the usual number. So why do you think there's so much churn this year?
Well, you've got a number of reasons. You've got redistricting, which had implications. So you've got, for instance, I think what you were referring to is both Governor Cody and Senator Gill got mushed into the same district, and they're running against each other. They're longtime elected senators. You've got folks who are retired, folks who just hung up their spikes. I'll think of a guy in my party who did an outstanding job, Fred Madden, in the 4th legislative district, former senior leader in the state police. He's decided the time has come. He's going to hang up his cleats. Our guy's Paul Moriarty, who I think is outstanding. I'm not doing politics tonight when I say that, but you've got different reasons. But you're absolutely right. You've got 20% of the Senate and 25% of the Assembly, where you've got a different reality. So we're going to see. please get out and vote. That would be my one. You teed it up, so I got to deliver the fastball down the middle of the plate. Folks, register and vote because it matters and your vote counts.
We have Tennyson Donier here, and you have a question you got via social about the election, right?
Hello,
Yes.
Tennyson.
How's it going?
Well, thank you, sir.
So this question is about the primaries that are coming up. And, I'll save some of the exposition, but, this is from Steve in Washington Township, who, brought up the fact that all 120 seats are up for grabs this year. And looking at 2021, saw a large amount of these seats were uncontested in the primaries. And many of them were considered safe for one party or the other. And there's a high probability that that's the case this time, with about 12% of New Jersey voters participating in the primaries in 2021. It looks like the cycle could be the same, with most primaries uncontested. So do you envision electoral reform that would make elections more competitive and provide voters with more of a choice and thus compel greater voter turnout?
I mean, yeah, more choice and more transparency and more access seem to me to be three elements of a positive cocktail of election reality. Yeah, but you had some folks, think back 2 years ago, nobody was talking about Steve Sweeney and his two assembly mates in any way, shape, or form losing a general election. And so the people, not only yours truly included, looked past the primary, we looked past the general. But listen, the more people, I know this is going to sound as a broad statement, but I believe with all my heart, the more people involved in democracy, the better. And that means more people voting, but also more people who want to serve in elected office. And I think whatever we can do to lengthen those lists, the amount of folks who want to serve and the amount of folks who want to and in fact vote, that's all good for the home team.
But don't you think that
I knew there'd be a bug.
Yeah, that the odds are stacked against reformers and first-time candidates who are women, people of color, young people, because we have this system in the primary where the party endorses candidates who then get preferential treatment on the ballot and run as a slate with the sort of, the blessing of the party. Don't you think that actually decreases the ability to really, decreases democracy, basically?
Yeah. I've got to be a little bit careful because we're in the middle. Somebody is suing over this, so I've got to be careful in terms of not getting into the specifics of that. But I'll keep it general. I think, first of all, I'm incredibly proud of the state for all. You could focus on all the challenges and hurdles we have. Man, we are, we're not perfect, but boy, I think do a lot of things really well. I'm in the middle of negotiating the budget, which takes about 3 or 4 months. I'm the chair of the National Governors Association, so I've got a very good window on other states. Damn, we look really good. I say that because I think we all get our nose pressed against the glass, including yours truly, on stuff where we see a flaw or it's not as perfect as we want it to be. But color me open-minded to things that get more people to vote and more people to want to serve.
Okay, let's go to the phones. We have James from Rumson, a neighbor of yours, is ready for you.
Hello,
James.
How are you, James?
Good evening, Governor. I'm very well, thank you. And yourself?
Very well, sir. Thanks for calling in.
All right. My question is, there's a critical shortage of judges in New Jersey state courts. I'm an attorney. I don't do a lot of litigation, but litigants are suffering, courts are backlogged, and I think the Senate and the governor's office has to fill these vacancies.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you, James. And we are trying our hardest. It's a complicated process. Some of the things we do, you put your signature. For instance, I mentioned that resolution I'm making January Muslim Community Heritage Month or whatever it's called. That came to me from the legislature, and we made a decision in a nanosecond to sign that. Other stuff's a lot more complicated. And this happens to be on the complicated list. That doesn't mean we're not making progress. We are. And we try to cast as wide a net as possible. We work with the senators. This is a Senate-specific relationship in terms of appointments, judicial in particular. We work well with them. We then vet the candidates. That takes time. We then make a decision on whether we're going to nominate or not. We usually do it in packages because you may have a favorite candidate. I may have one, and we want to try to keep balance. And then there's the Senate has, this is so-called advice and consent. They have the ability, as they should, by the way, to vet these candidates, make them go through the Judiciary Committee, and then ultimately to a full Senate vote. So we've made progress, but there's no question we have too many vacancies. Everybody knows it. We're working hard to fill them. The one vacancy above all else, all others, that I'm personally focused on is we got to fill up one more seat on our Supreme Court. And that is one that I'm personally leading and deeply involved in. And obviously that's one, all of these you got to get right. That's one you really got to get right.
Is the bottleneck getting the nominations to the legislature, or is it getting the nominees confirmed by the legislature?
You typically don't get to the legislature unless you've got a strong sense that this is going to work out. I wouldn't say it's any one speed bump or bottleneck. It's just a process that takes longer. And COVID came in the middle of all this, and that wreaked havoc with all of our systems, including the judicial system. But we're at it and working with the Senate. We'll get there. We want to have, listen, we want to have this is another one where if you have a window into the country and you're not just focused on New Jersey, we are the envy. Our judiciary is the envy of our country. We want to make sure we keep it that way.
Okay, let's stay with callers. Thanks, James, for your call. And now let's go to Pranita from Rahway. You're on the line with the governor.
Hello, Pranita.
Hi, Governor. I have a two-part question for you. I applaud your goal of 100% clean energy by 2035, but I'm just confused about why you're allowing the construction of 7 dirty fossil fuel projects, including the one in Woodbridge that has not even had an environmental justice impact statement done. Do you think individuals in Casey were meaningfully involved, even though there was only one public hearing, which was not conducted in the community, and there was no notice in any Woodbridge circulating newspaper? The DEP commissioner is at your pleasure, so can we count on you and your DEP to reject the permit for the Woodbridge plant, or at least to restart the review process pursuant to the EJ law rules?
Are those your questions?
Yes.
I didn't want to cut you off. Thank you. So I feel at home only because the Woodbridge plant comes up in every Ask the Governor. So I now know that I'm at Ask the Governor because it continues to come up.
This is citizen activism.
I love it. It's the way it should be. By the way, I think this is a model for other states as well. The fact that you and I throw ourselves out there with tennis and once a month. We are committed without question to a clean energy New Jersey by 2035. The environmental justice law that we have is the strongest in the nation. Having said all that, we deal with each one of these plants one at a time. We call balls and strikes on each of them. We'll continue to. We have a massive undertaking in offshore wind. As you likely know, we've allowed the nuclear power plants to live safely and responsibly to the end of their life. We've got a huge amount going on in solar. And slowly but surely, we're going to get there. I'd like to tell you that we could flip a switch and get there tomorrow. We can't do that. But are we going to meet our goals? Yes, emphatically, we will.
You've made a coherent, good argument that people might disagree with, but you've made an argument about the Jersey City plant and that it's needed for sewage overflow during storm.
Newark.
Oh, Newark.
Yep.
But we're out of time. But give me like 15 seconds on why the Woodbridge one makes sense.
I'm not sure I can give it to you in 15 seconds, but I'll have my people follow up with you. How's that?
Okay, well, I guess I got myself in the way there with our timing, but we're going to take a quick break and we will be back with Ask Governor Murphy. I'm Nancy Solomon, and we'll be right back.
WBGO, WNYC, and WHYY. Got a question for New Jersey's governor? Call us now at 844-745-8255. That's 844-745-TALK. Pose your question on Twitter or Facebook with the hashtag AskGovMurphy.
I'm Nancy Solomon, and we're live with Governor Murphy and taking your calls. So let's talk about mental health and young people. You've got a new national project to improve mental health for young people with the National Governors Association, of which you are the chair.
Yep.
Tell us about that.
Yeah. So when you become the chair of the National Governors Association, you get an initiative and you raise money into funding that initiative. And the one, as does your spouse or first partner, mine is strengthening mental health among our youth. Tammy's, which is her passion from day one, infant and maternal health. And we've been going around the country. I think we're in Salt Lake City, Santa Monica, California, Detroit, Michigan. We're going to be in Philadelphia later this month. And we will convene for my last time as chair in Atlantic City, New Jersey in July. And we will present a playbook for all American states to use, frankly, all levels of government to use in battling this epidemic, which that's what it is. And it was a reality before the pandemic. And we all know it's been exacerbated dramatically in New Jersey. You know, for all the resources and money and bodies and ideas were thrown in it, we're not exempt. And you know, there have been some horrible examples of that, including loss of life of late.
Yeah, and I'm going to ask you about that in a moment. But so a playbook, so this is measures that every state could take
Correct.
to improve services, mental health services for young people.
And if, for lack of a better way to put it, a curated list of greatest hits of ideas or policies or programs that we see in other states. Utah, my great vice chair, Republican Governor Spencer Cox, has got something really innovative in terms of if you're really stressing, you're raising your hand and getting instant help. So there'll be a whole range of things. You remember, the National Governors Association is nonpartisan, so the playbook has to include the range of things that may or may not fit, all of which may or may not fit any particular state.
Well, I could see that being a real problem because there's such a high rate of suicide among gay and lesbian youth, transgender youth.
You bet.
It's a huge problem.
Yep, absolutely.
So how do you get Republicans on board with that?
Well, at the end of the day, first of all, the NGA is really good at, winding its way through that and finding common ground. And at the end of the day, it's up to us. But you will see things that, New Jersey's pretty open to. We're an open book, I think, right? So we are open to almost any sensible policy. But the states that are closed-minded to that and discriminate, first of all, they're putting lives at risk. But secondly, that'll be part of the playbook that they're not going to use. That doesn't mean that it's not going to be in the playbook, though.
I wonder if that's true, what you're saying about New Jersey, but that's for another day. I mean, because we have these school board fights going on here.
Yeah. I actually meant at the state level, but you're right. You're right.
So I believe we have a question about mental health from Tennyson Donier. Somebody wrote to us about this?
Yeah, so it's actually about bullying in schools, which is obviously related. This is from Leaney in Bergen County. Bullying schools has increased recently. My 10-year-old was bullied for over 8 months, and the school did nothing until he told me he wanted to end his life. The school then found no evidence of bullying after I confronted the staff and principal due to his emotional state, because the incidents didn't perfectly fit within the categories of racism, sex and gender, and religion. Bullying comes in all forms and shapes nowadays. Will this way of defining it change?
It has to. I don't think there's any other answer to that. This poor girl who killed herself. I've spoken to her mom and dad. You read this Jack Reed story in Lawrenceville. He happened to be a New York kid, but killed himself in New Jersey. We got to we need a on our side of the equation, a whole of government approach that reaches into communities and into school systems. Your question a minute ago, or your slight disagreement a couple of minutes ago, gets at one of New Jersey's biggest challenges, and that is we're the ultimate home rule state. You've got 565 communities, you've got over 600 school districts with boards, et cetera. So our job is to try to do everything we can, not just to bring them along, but to reach as deeply as we can into those communities. And we've got to be completely, I don't know what's the right word, holistic in terms of how you define bullying. It can't be, we can't spend any amount of time debating, did it fit into this box or that box? We just got to get at it. And the more people, by the way, one of our elements of the playbook back to mental health is training the frontline people to be better at recognizing when there are issues, whether it be bullying, mental health stress, suicidal tendencies or thoughts, et cetera.
Now, you have said in response to, I believe you were speaking recently in response to one of these tragic suicides that resulted or was connected somehow to bullying at school. And you talked about the fact that New Jersey has the toughest anti-bullying laws in the country. But it seems to me, you can't really criminalize and legislate this thing in that way, that it's, kids need services, because you're going to, as soon as you have like zero tolerance policies, you end up, entrapping and ensnaring kids who really don't belong in the criminal justice system.
Yeah, which you obviously, and usually kids of color, overwhelmingly, if you look at our past.
Right. So I think don't you have a proposal out there that's going to do something in terms of New Jersey schools and creating a hub and spoke system for mental health services?
We do. Let me go back to one point on the legislation, and then I'll come to that. I'd say the laws, whether it's bullying or hazing, whatever it might be, are necessary but not sufficient. So I think you need them. But that to me is foundational. You've got to then have the services, the availability, as many folks as possible trained up to spot things. And absolutely, we are, Christine Norbert Beyer and her folks at the Department of Children and Families and our teams at the Department of Human Services are putting out what you describe exactly as a hub and spoke model. There was a big debate, should it replace the system that's been out there already? And we decided, you know what, life's too short, we'll do both. The system that's out there now is extremely helpful, but it probably only touches about 2% of our school kids. This will be a much broader net. We'll leave that in place, but this is a much broader net, and we'll see how each do coming up.
Like all things, as I'm sure you've come to know very well, there's always criticism of whatever it is that you're trying to do. So New Jersey Politico reporter Caroline Petrocohen had a story recently about school administrators say they're concerned that your plan to boost mental health services for kids will remove those services out of the local school sites into regional sites, and that's going to, yes, it's going to serve more kids, but it's not going to be as hands-on in the school.
I would just say, as a general matter, not just the hub and spoke model, we're put us in the and both category. Right now, given the crisis that we're dealing with, mental health generally, but specific to bullying, suicidal tendency, whatever it might be, we're not going to take our foot off the gas. And that includes in the schools themselves.
What was behind your decision that your initiative for the National Governors Association would be mental health for young people?
It's funny you asked that. We had, so I was vice chair last year. Asa Hutchison of Arkansas was chair. He's running for president, by the way. A very good man. He had picked a computer science, access to computer science education for high schoolers, and quite successfully, I have to say. I asked everybody in my orbit, probably 3 to 6 months before I came chair, to give me their best ideas on what it should be. And there was a list. I forget what was on the list. Literally, it was inside of 5 seconds that I made the decision. And I think it's because it's so obvious, both through the New Jersey lens, but broadly. There isn't, almost no kid is untouched by this right now. Again, you had challenges, social media driven, right? You look at some of this crap on TikTok that they claim is age appropriate, too much time with video games, spending time alone. We all know what those issues are, in addition to the tried and true stresses that kids have on homework, or Dennis's question of bullying, or the normal stuff. And then you layer on top of that remote learning. You can't hang with your friends. When you get back in, you're wearing a mask, all of which we had to do to keep as many people alive as possible. But it came with not only a learning loss, but a big toll on mental health. So it was a no-brainer for me,
Okay.
sadly.
Let's go back to the phones. We have Marisa from New York on the line. Marisa?
Hello, Marisa.
Hello. Good evening, Governor. Good evening, Nancy. Thank you so much for taking my call. I am a recently retired educator from New Jersey. I spent 31 years teaching and working with my fellow administrative colleagues in the Teaneck Public School District in New Jersey.
Nice.
And I am just calling to inquire about movement on reinstating the automatic cost of living adjustment for retirees of the state administered retirement system.
Yep.
The cost of living adjustment was halted, I believe, in 2010. And it's my understanding that the pension fund needs to be funded at a particular level in order for retirees to receive a cost of living adjustment. I happen to be a retiree that had the years in and the age to retire, but I'm not old enough for Social Security. So a cost of living adjustment would be helpful.
Yep.
So I guess my question is, are there plans to expedite funding of the Teachers Pension and Annuity Fund and any other state retirement system so that increase, that COLA could be reinstated for retirees?
Well asked. First of all, bless you for your career as an educator in I think you said Teaneck, so thank you for that. We're faced, the state didn't, both sides of the aisle, by the way, did not make a full pension payment for 25 consecutive years. And you're absolutely right. In 2010, the COLA was ripped back, and very macro level, hey, we're going to save $3 billion. And my answer is, well, you never spoke to somebody like Marissa, who, this matters. I can't tell you how many retirees I've met where it matters. The problem is, it's not necessarily when it gets to a certain level, but we have to prioritize funding the pension system. So I would never say never on COLA, cost of living allowance. We look at different proposals literally all the time, and there are some good friends of mine who are very diligent about presenting proposals. But we are doing everything we can to get the pension system back on its feet. Our budget has an over $7 billion line item for the pension. So for the past 3 budgets, we will have been a total of $21 billion into the system. It's a big reason why we just got our 7th credit rating upgrade. The stronger we are financially in our fiscal sort of well-being, the more likely it is, Marissa, that I hope not too far from now, we'll be able to get back to cost of living.
So, during Chris Christie's governorship, I think, was it, I'm forgetting the number, was it 11?
11 downgrades.
Credit downgrades.
And
So if we get to 11 positives, does that get us back to where we were, or it doesn't work that way?
No, well, it's it largely does. I don't have in front of me where the 11 came from in terms of which agencies. But listen, I think for those folks out there who are into these things, we're broadly speaking an A-rated credit right now. The highest you can be is a AAA rated credit. We used to be a AAA rated credit. I think the realistic expectation assuming we continue to behave the way we're behaving in terms of fiscal responsibility. And by the way, we're starting to see, Nancy, the early signs that the economy is softening.
Yeah.
So that's the other flashing yellow light. I don't envision a 2008 where the wheels fall off the bus, but we're starting to see some softening. But I think our rightful resting place is a AA credit. We won't get there tomorrow, but God willing, we will get there.
Okay, we got lots of folks waiting to ask you questions. Let's go to Jack from Mendham.
Speaking of Governor Christie, he's from there.
Exactly.
Hello, Jack.
Jack, you're on the line with the governor.
Exactly. Hello, Governor,
you, Jack?
and thank you for being such a pleasant relief from our former governor. I want to thank you for that, for being so kind and considerate.
I'm not allowed to comment on that.
And listen, I know you can't, but I can say it. And hello, Nancy Solomon. How are you doing?
Hi, Jack. I'm well. Ask your question. We're whizzing along here.
I'm Governor. Just a comment on your former caller first. I'm a retired school principal, 47 years in education. Okay, and kudos to you for bringing up bullying and social media and whatever. It's a huge problem, and people not in education don't realize the havoc that it plays in schools. And
Amen.
Kudos to you for addressing that. I really appreciate that. I called you a couple months ago and spoke to you about farmland assessment, and
I remember it.
You were nice enough to send Rob Field out to speak to me. Okay, and we had a conversation. And as a matter of fact, I'll mention, I don't know whether Nancy wants me to. She was nice enough. She came out after my conversation and took the tour of the mansion around Mendham and saw all of the fake farms that I was talking about when I spoke to you. I know
true.
better than to try to speak for Nancy. So
Wait, you mean
I'll let her talk.
But Jack, you mean a big, huge barn that has a gymnasium with a huge basketball court? That's not a barn. That's not a farm.
I'm glad you brought that up. No, I don't think it is, Nancy, but maybe you can share that with the governor, what you saw, okay? But my question is this, Governor. I've given up on the politicians trying to change the law. I really have. So I have a new tack, and I approached the Attorney General's office because they indicted 3 politicians from Wildwood for signing documents that said that they were full-time employees when they weren't. I don't know whether you're familiar with that, but I don't understand why, and this is what I spoke to the Attorney General's office about, why it isn't fraud when people are signing the farmland assessment forms that say this is an official document and that there's a penalty, a $5,000 penalty if they lie about it. Why that can't be addressed that way? Because I think I told you there were 20 farms in Mendham Township in 1965 when the good, well-intentioned law went into practice. There's 148 of those farms now.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a lot. Okay, Jack, let's get an answer because we're going to come to a break and run out of time.
I think, Jack, I said when you called in a couple of months ago that it's not limited to Morris County.
No.
I'm in Monmouth, and people, the typical approach is using bees. But Jack, with your blessing, I'm going to have my man Rob Field give you a shout. He's listening, and Alex Altman will make sure he does. And let's kick around some ideas. Maybe there's a legal approach here. I think folks, for the most part, at least the ones I'm aware of over the years here, are within the law. We may not like the law, so I just would leave that out there as but frustrates you. I understand.
This is Ask Governor Murphy. We'll be right back. to the question, why aren't you behind reform? Why are you fighting the lawsuit instead of supporting it?
Did you pay Bill the call?
I don't know Bill. I know a lot of folks in South Orange.
that's
I
what-
don't know Bill.
I know where you live, and you're not too far from Bill, so I don't accept that explanation at all. I'm not going to build on my answer from earlier. I just look at, since we've been in office, we've gotten early in-person voting. If you're on parole or probation, you could vote. We do automatic registration. I hope someday we get same-day registration. There are other examples of that where we have moved the needle meaningfully. And again, I'm open for discussions on what can make more people, as I said earlier, more people want to serve and more people want to vote. However, I am not there, and I'd rather not. If we do a big ranked choice discussion, we'll be here a long time. I don't know. I think the jury's out on that. I'm going to be more definitive on that one. So to be just discussed at another time. But that's one that I think your passion. I've never heard you promote ranked choice. I'm not sure where you are in it, but your passion is the
I don't
line.
promote anything.
No, but your passion is really the line and the county organizations more than anything. So we should debate that.
My passion is democracy.
And so is mine.
I want to see more democracy. I mean, okay, I'm going to push back once and then we'll move on. But you endorsed.
Are we ready for a commercial or not?
You endorsed Rob Menendez, the son of Bob Menendez, our U.S. Senator. He didn't have any elected official experience. He ran for Congress. That's pretty, most people do some city council and, work their way up. And he was, put forward by the Hudson County Machine, and you endorsed him like the first day he
I was
announced.
the first guy to endorse him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So why?
I have two thoughts for you. I didn't have any electoral experience before I became governor, number one. Number two, I know Rob. This is a guy I know and trust. I had made him a commissioner on the Port Authority. So this isn't like somebody who, they said, hey, let's get the governor to endorse a guy he doesn't know or he never met. That didn't happen. So I on that one, and by the way, he's off to a great start. So I'll just leave it at that.
Okay. Well, I promise not to go any further. Let's go back to the phones.
You sure you don't want to?
No.
Okay.
My producer will give me a kick. We have Sandra from Flemington on the line with you. Sandra?
Hey, Sandra, how are you?
Hey there. Good evening. Thank you for doing this program, Governor Murphy and Nancy Solomon. Thank you so much. You're a big public transportation guy. So a question about Amtrak, Acela specifically. So Amtrak is reducing its Acela service as it goes through Trenton, going down and back up from Washington, D.C. And when you call Amtrak and say, why are you doing this? Because they didn't change the train schedule out of Woodbridge. They said, oh, we're looking at statistics from 2020. Okay, what happened in 2020?
Yeah.
What were people doing in 2020? They were not traveling in 2020. So that really is just a horrible answer and not a good one in terms of trying to serve the people close to Trenton. So there you go. That's my question. By the way,
Okay.
I agree with Nancy Solomon on the Board of Education.
Okay. Yeah. I don't on that one. I don't necessarily disagree. I live in Middletown, and I will tell you something. That is that board is a trip. So we'll leave it at that. I was not aware in my lifetime that Acela ever stopped in Trenton. I don't believe Trenton is on the stop. So I got to. This is the longest we've gone on this program ever. Before I asked Alex to follow up with somebody, but can you get somebody on the team to follow up with Sandra? It's probably somebody in the transportation lane, but not necessarily at NJ Transit. I'm a big, I go to National Governors Association. I'm also chair of the Democratic Governors Association. Go to Washington a fair amount. I was at the state dinner last week for the South Korean president, which was very cool. That's a country that's incredibly important to New Jersey. I take the Acela a lot. I take it largely out of Metro Park or Newark. Occasionally we'll get out or get on in Philadelphia. But Sandra, the premise of your question is a good one. What are you looking at 2020 to make decisions on? I think, I'm not sure 2019 is the right time either, because habits have clearly changed. But 2022 is probably a decent place to start, I would think. But Sandra, Alex and I will get somebody to Richard Sun maybe would be the best person to follow up with Sandra. Thank you.
It seems to be if it is true that the train doesn't stop in Trenton, which we seem to be a little unclear about, it seems to me it would be an enormous economic benefit which the city of Trenton could use
Oh, yeah.
to be on the, it's on the Northeast Corridor
You
to
bet.
get those stops and
So the
have
t-
that service.
You bet. The two communities, I can almost say with 100% certainty that the Acela doesn't stop in Trenton. That's not to say it shouldn't. Alex, you agree with me? But there are two communities that have been talked about, Nancy, and I think they're both worth looking at, Trenton and New Brunswick. And New Brunswick is obviously, the heart of Middlesex County. It's the home to Rutgers' flagship campus. We're building the Helix, which is going to be one of the biggest innovation centers in America. It's right in the middle of the state. I think that makes sense. I think Trenton is the capital city, a city that could use a shot in the arm, to your point. It's where I go to work most days. I think that's a good suggestion as well. So, you a Trenton guy?
I am.
I love that. Okay.
Would you, and have you ever taken the Acela train to or from Trenton?
I've taken Amtrak. Yeah. I've taken it to New York.
So, yeah, and according to the Amtrak website, Trenton is still listed on the Acela section. So I don't know whether that solves things, but let's try to squeeze in a few more calls. We have Maria from Fairhaven on the line.
Hello, Maria.
Hi, Governor Murphy. Thanks for taking my call.
My pleasure. You're also in my neighborhood.
I know. I have a very pedestrian question and concern, actually. My question is, why are pedestrians abusing the pedestrian right-of-way law that I believe you passed in 2021? And my concern is that and I'm a driver and I'm a pedestrian. My concern is that pedestrians will just bolt out of nowhere, walk into traffic, they'll have their earbuds in, they'll be on their cell phones, they completely disregard the drivers. And I feel that, God forbid there's an accident, that the burden shouldn't be on the driver completely when the pedestrian is not being responsible or taking any accountability for crossing the street. I mean,
Yeah.
I've seen them walk across, and right in town, in Red Bank, in Rumson,
Yep.
it's all over.
Yep.
But I really have a concern about that because I feel that they're abusing the law that you passed, which was supposed to be protective and so destructive.
Exactly. Maria, let's get Alex, let's get the aforementioned Rob Field to give Maria a shout because I want to get into this a little bit more. But Maria, it strikes a chord with me, and I'll give you one example. I'm a little bit injured right now, but my wife and I run. I never in my life have run with earbuds in either for phone or music, because for this very reason, I'm afraid. But by the way, pedestrians may be abusing their privileges, but if they're up against a car, we know how that's going to end. It's not going to end terribly well for the pedestrian. But it's the reason I've never done that. And I think there's, and sadly, there's a lot of behavior in cars that are in the same category where people are texting or listening to loud music, whatever it might be, which by the way, I've done myself. So I get it. But you've got on the other side of that trade, you've got a similar reality. So I'm going to ask Rob to follow up with him, Maria, and hope to see you in the neighborhood.
And what injury are you recovering from?
Right now, a back. I'm not sure what's gone on. I ran a 5K a couple of weeks ago, and it went pretty well. It seemed like a good thing at the time, but the period since then has not been very kind to me. So
You and me, we're getting old.
yeah, I know that. This will tell you how old I am. I got my booster that's now allowed for 65-year-olds and up yesterday. And folks, if you're out there and you're 65 and up, you're now eligible for a booster. It doesn't matter which one it is. Get out there and get it done.
Okay, we're going to squeeze in one last call. We have Susan from Scotch Plains on the line.
Hey, Susan.
Hi, Governor Murphy. Thank you for taking my call. I'm interested to know what you think about the proliferation of artificial turf fields in the state of New Jersey. and the implications that they have on the environment, as it is local municipalities as mine and many others across the state and Board of Eds are approving artificial turf fields, ripping up grass and laying down plastic. And it has huge implications for the environment. And I wonder whether the state is considering regulating that.
Well, I don't think I've ever been asked this question. So the answer is, to the best of my knowledge, the state is not considering anything at the moment, but that's something I'd be open-minded to. I have mixed emotions. I had literally had this conversation about a particular project within the past couple of days. And the pluses and minuses here are pretty straightforward. On the margin, you'd much rather have natural grass. Better for the environment, better for the kids. Particularly the old models of turf where they put really hard surfaces under the turf. Bad news is, mud pits where the field's unusable after a lot of rain or snow or whatever it might be. And so that more maintenance. And the turf fields have the inverse. They're easier to maintain. They're not muddy, but they're not as good for our kids, and they're not as good for the environment. In fact, they're bad for the environment. So I don't know that I've got a locked-in view, Susan. Let me ask maybe we'll go to the well once more on Rob Field. Ask Rob to follow up with Susan, because I actually don't know, Alex. Maybe you do, if there are any bills out there that would address this, but that's something I'd be interested in having a conversation on.
Okay. Thanks for your call, Susan. So I've been wanting to ask you about the Waterfront Commission. Your administration went to court against New York State to get rid of it. And this is the commission that was established to investigate mob control and corruption at the ports. You won the battle, but I wonder if we're losing the war on this one. I mean, New York Governor Kathy Hochul has put money into her budget now to create a new regulatory agency. And there was a recent story in the Star Ledger where Ted Sherman found reports buried by the Chris Christie administration that found that there's still lots of problems with organized crime, drug use, racism, sexism, no-show jobs at the ports. So what is wrong with the current Waterfront Commission, and why did you want to replace it?
What's wrong with it? Everything. It's become a sham. In the Marlon Brando days, this was desperately needed. Organized crime was running rampant. This is now, folks listening out there, this is early to mid 50s. It's a completely different reality today. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. First of all, plus or minus 90% of the shipping activity is in Jersey and not New York. Number two, if you talked, I've never seen management and labor more aligned, including way back when, before I was even a candidate. Tell me what you raised the Bayonne Bridge, which got done under Governor Christie's time, and that was a game changer, so that the big super tankers could come in, and fix the Waterfront Commission. Why? We can't hire. The backlog, last time I asked, was over 600 empty spaces that were not filled. Permits that aren't being given out. And so we're not blind to organized crime. We're not blind to the fact you need hardcore regulators. Jersey is the king of the hill on all of that as a general matter. We're going to have the New Jersey State Police at the highest levels step into the shoes of the entirely ineffective Waterfront Commission. And I promise folks, this is going to be smoother. It'll be just as safe and and by the way, that doesn't mean there aren't issues, but the fact you found those issues, to me, tells me that the Waterfront Commission wasn't doing their job, and we're going to make sure we do the job.
I guess that's a fair point. But I'm not as read in as Ted Sherman is, but so we will leave that one there, Waterfront Commission. Let's just squeeze in a little bit about Rutgers. The faculty went on strike. You called them into the office, both sides, administration, the union. It took 5 days, but you got a settlement. Are you happy with that?
I am, although I said this to them the Monday, they came in on a Monday. We ordered everybody into our new State House, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
I literally didn't know where I was going, literally to the conference room, Monday morning, and it got solved at like 1 a.m. that Saturday. So just over 5 days. I said to them privately what I'd say publicly. I'm really not happy that it came to a strike. I'm really unhappy. But it's complicated, and I am happy that we got them to the table and we got resolution, because otherwise the people who pay for that are the students and their families, and we could not allow that to happen. I hear my music.
Yeah. Well, and we're almost out of time, obviously, but do you place the responsibility for it coming to a strike on the president of Rutgers?
I blame it on 10 months of no progress, period. Go Devils.
You've been listening to Ask Governor Murphy, a co-production of WBGO, WHYY, and WNYC. Many thanks to Tennyson Danye, Doug Doyle, Joseph Capriglione, Wayne Schulmeister, Ed Haber, Matthew Mirando. I'm Nancy Solomon. Thanks for listening.